After my husband's first love returned to the capital, I secretly kept a lover in South Alley. He was a poor provincial scholar come to take the imperial exams, and he bore a striking resemblance to the man I'd once loved, 7 parts alike, at least. I kept him for half a year, then I grew bored, made up an excuse, and vanished from his life completely. I never imagined that half a year later, a new emperor would ascend the throne. My husband and I went to the palace to pay our respects. I lifted my head and there he was, my former lover, sitting on the dragon throne, dressed in bright yellow imperial robes, his eyes dark and unreadable. "What a coincidence," he said softly. "The Marquis's wife looks exactly like my late wife." My stomach stirred, inside me. A life had already grown for 6 months. 01. My husband came home drunk and collapsed in my chambers that night. A month later, the physician confirmed I was with child. When he heard the news, my husband did not sleep a wink all night. He held the sachet given by my cousin, sitting under the eaves until dawn, letting the wind blow through him. Early the next morning, he sat by my bed. At the sight of my still flat belly, his eyes reddened again. Unbidden, sad as he was, he still took my hand. "Unwind," he said, his voice firm. "Everything before was my fault. Now that we have a child, I will mend my ways. I will live properly with you." On the surface, I wept with gratitude. Inside, I thought his words ridiculous. In this entire Marquis manner, it made little difference whether he was here or not. 02. Mother had taught me since I was little, when great clans married, they married for fame, status, dignity, and prestige. Sincerity, it mattered least of all. But my cousin was different. She wanted nothing but true love. She was the most dazzling woman in the capital, stunning, brilliant, talented in every way. All the noble sons and young lords of the capital admired her, including my husband, the heir of the Yongchang Marquisate. Even though she never gave him so much as a second glance, he remained determined to stay faithful to her. Before marrying me, he turned the Marquis manor upside down in protest. After we wed, he never once stepped into my room. More than a year later, the old Marquis passed away, and my husband inherited the title. But the moment my cousin returned to the capital, he forgot the manor entirely. He followed her around every day, fawning over her. The entire household, guests, accounts, purchases, fell entirely on my shoulders. My mother-in-law was weak and bedridden. Seeing how hard I worked, she excused me from daily greetings. "You've borne so much," she sighed, holding my hand one afternoon. "When Honga comes home, I will speak to him properly. A man with a family, trailing after a woman all day, what sort of example is that?" I bowed my head and agreed politely. Inside, I felt nothing. It was better that my husband stayed out. He could chase his love, I would amuse myself. 03. Once my cousin returned, my husband barely came home. Bored, I took a lover in South Alley. He was a poor scholar come for the exams, from a humble family, but devastatingly handsome. I took a liking to him at first sight. I pretended to be the wife of a wealthy merchant, winning him over under the pretense of supporting his studies. First books, then ink and paper. We talked of poetry by day, of hearts under the moon. Eventually, our talks led to bed. The scholar was shy, bound by worldly rules, but I shed a few tears, acted coquettish, and before long, he gave in. I rented a courtyard in South Alley for him to live in, and for me to visit him every night. Slowly, the scholar seemed to have truly fallen for me. Every night after we lay together, he would heat water and gently bathe me. Every morning, he would take a brush and carefully draw my eyebrows for me. Sometimes, when I spoke of my absent husband, he would grip my hand solemnly and promise, "When I pass the exams and win a title, I will speak to your husband. I will make him set you free. If he does not love you, why should he trap you for a lifetime? Rest assured, when you are free, I will marry you with all proper rituals." Looking into his sincere eyes, I could not help but shudder. When men spoke of love, they were just like my husband, wildfire in an old house, out of control. I had to leave him quickly. The excuse was easy enough. My husband had returned to me. A reformed husband was worth more than gold. Now that he had turned over a new leaf, as his proper wife, I had to live with him properly. That day was the last time I met the scholar. after speaking my piece. I touched his cheek tenderly, pretending to be reluctant. I told him I had rented the yard for another half-year, so he could focus on his exams. The scholar's face darkened. But no matter how he cried or pleaded, my mind was made up. That night, he was unusually rough. Late at night, I returned to the Marquis Manor, my body covered in bruises. I had just washed and lain down when a servant announced the Marquis had returned. The next moment, my husband stormed into my room. Reeking of wine, he stared at me, blinked, and his eyes turned red. Yua said, she said, since I'm already married, I should live properly with you. Yua was my cousin, Liu Ru Yua. Whatever she said, my husband obeyed without question, even if she told him to be devoted to another woman. I watched silently as my husband hiccuped and stumbled toward me. 1 step, 2 steps, thud, he collapsed on the floor, unconscious. I sighed, dragged him onto the bed, and blew out the lamp. The next morning, my husband saw our disheveled clothes and assumed we had slept together that night. A month later, my pulse confirmed pregnancy. He thought the child was his. 04, after my husband reformed. I stayed in the manor resting for half a year. During those months, I lived quietly, but I still heard of great events. The biggest was the establishment of the new crown prince. The late emperor had no sons, only one daughter, who had died young. In recent years, his health had failed, and the fight for the throne had grown fierce, with imperial princes tearing each other apart. Then, at this year's palace examination, the emperor recognized the crown prince, who had been living among commoners. The crown prince was none other than the scholar who had come to take the exams. It was said he looked exactly like the late emperor. During the exam, the emperor froze on the spot. After questioning his birthplace and age, he broke down weeping. 20 years prior, during a southern tour, the emperor had slept with a common woman. He had not revealed his identity, only left a token, promising to fetch her to the capital soon. Then he returned to the palace and forgot. The woman discovered she was pregnant. Terrified, she was disowned by her own family. But a mother's love made her strong. She gave birth alone and raised the child. The boy was diligent, studying hard from a young age, and passed the provincial exam while still young. After his mother died, he took the token to the capital to find his father. To fulfill her last wish, he looked so much like the emperor, so much that the emperor recognized him at a single glance. After father and son reunited, the emperor immediately named him crown prince. As if a great weight had lifted from his heart, the emperor's health declined rapidly. Within a month, he was dead. The crown prince became emperor. 05. By the time my husband and I entered the palace to meet the new emperor, I was 6 months pregnant. These months, my husband truly seemed to have reformed, tending to my every need. In the carriage to the palace, he held my hand and sighed. His Majesty is good in every way, except his harem is empty. He refuses to select concubines. He says he already married while living among commoners. Though he's separated from his wife now, he will find her sooner or later and make her empress. Unlike the late emperor, this one is a true loyal lover. I listened to his words, leaning obediently against his chest. Inside, I almost laughed. Loyal. There were no truly loyal men in this world, only women who plotted carefully, until the man could not live without them. Look at my husband. He had pined for my cousin for years. Now, he had forgotten all about her. The carriage entered the palace. My husband and I went to the imperial study to greet the emperor. This subject and his wife greet your majesty. Rise. A calm voice came from the yellow-robed figure behind the desk. Why did that voice sound so familiar? I slowly lifted my eyes, and there he was, my former lover, sitting on the dragon throne, a faint smile on his lips. At the sight of those familiar eyes, I froze. Scholar, emperor, ascended the throne. The chaotic pieces clicked together in my mind, forming a single, horrifying truth. The lover I had abandoned half a year ago was now the emperor of Great Xia. The Marquis and Marchioness are truly devoted to one another. What a strange coincidence. The Marchioness looks exactly like my late wife. How long have you been with child, Marchioness? His question was calm, but cold sweat broke out all over me. My husband, however, noticed nothing amiss. Your Majesty. 6 months and more, on the throne. The emperor's eyebrows lifted slightly. His eyes turned dark. 6 months. Is it 06? To me, those words dripped with hidden meaning. To my husband, they were nothing out of the ordinary. He answered every casual question politely, sensing nothing wrong. Before we knew it, noon approached. The emperor glanced at the hour and invited us to stay for lunch. My husband naturally agreed, and as a dutiful wife, despite my inner terror, I had no choice but to obey. Thankfully, the emperor did not join us. My husband and I sat in the side hall, attended by palace servants. As dish after dish was set before me, my heart trembled again. From soup to stir-fry, snacks to desserts, every single one was my favorite. Your appetite has been poor during the pregnancy. Eat more, my husband said warmly, piling food onto my plate. I forced a smile and obeyed, but every bite tasted like ash. When the meal was nearly finished, a palace attendant suddenly arrived, saying the emperor wished to speak with the marquis in the study. My husband left alone, leaving me in the side hall, my heart in my throat. When I came to my senses, the hall was deathly quiet. The servants had all left without a sound. I was completely alone. Is anyone there? I called out. No reply. I sat in the hall, cold sweat soaking my back, my hand unconsciously covering my belly. There was no doubt about it, the emperor had ordered this. Once, he had been just a poor scholar. When I'd approached him pretending to be a merchant's wife, my name, my status, everything had been a lie. Now that he was emperor, uncovering my true identity would be child's play. And once he learned who I really was, he would know I had lied to him from start to finish. All men were the same. They might let you act willful and reckless, but they could never bear being played like a fool. Once their pride was shattered, no one knew what they might do next. All I could do now was pray that, for the sake of the support I'd once given him, he would not be too cruel. As long as I lived, I still had room to struggle. The Marchioness seems quite at ease. A figure in bright yellow stepped in from outside. I rose quickly and knelt. This humble wife greets your majesty. Step by step, he drew near, until he stood right before me. I stayed bowed low, motionless, until my legs ached and my body trembled faintly. Only then did the emperor speak, his tone indifferent. Sit, I exhaled in relief. Thank you, your majesty. The emperor took the main seat, his expression unreadable. I sat to one side, back straight, knees together, stiff with tension. Half a year ago, in that South Alley courtyard, I had always reclined lazily on the couch, watching him red in the sunlight. In less than 6 months, that bold, unguarded affection had turned into something unrecognizable. I stared down at my hands, faintly clenched into fists. A faint, bitter sense of regret rose in my throat, then was immediately crushed by my reason. We sat in silence for a long while. Just when I thought the meeting would end without another word, the emperor spoke suddenly. The Marquis and Marchioness are indeed deeply devoted. Your majesty is too kind. The more I look, the more you resemble my late wife. It is as if you were one and the same. This humble wife is unworthy of such a comparison. I evaded and deflected every one of his questions. At last, he could bear it no longer. Liu Ruowan, he stepped forward, seized my chin, and forced me to look up at him. Did you ever feel even a shred of sincerity for me? I froze. What was this? He spoke as if he had truly loved me deeply. When I did not answer, the emperor only grew angrier. I will ask you one question, and you will answer truthfully. If I find you lying, I will charge you with treason, and your entire Marquis clan will suffer with you. He glared at me fiercely, yet deep in his eyes, I saw a flicker of pleading. Whose child are you carrying? 07. On the way home, my husband put an arm around me and spoke of what had happened. I waited in the imperial study for nearly an hour, but His Majesty never appeared. When he finally came, he first asked me to help him find his late wife. Strange, though, he gave no name, no hometown, only that she looks just like you. He said to look for someone with your face, and I would know her when I saw her. Wanwan, could it be you have a sister who looks just like you? My brow twitched, my lips were slightly swollen, and I was gently rubbing them with my fingertip. At his words, I quickly lowered my hand. Dearest husband, you jest. I have no such sister. I only have an elder brother and a younger one. Among our relatives, there is only my cousin, and she looks nothing like me. At the mention of my cousin again, my husband's face did not shift at all. He pictured her face, then looked at me, and shook his head with a smile. Truly, they are nothing alike. Sigh, where am I even supposed to begin this task? I breathed inwardly a sigh of relief, glad to have diverted the topic. Earlier, in the side hall, right after the emperor had asked that question, I had begun to cry. I cried until I could barely breathe, until the world went dark. Seeing me break down like that, the emperor could press me no further. He only held me and soothed me. By the end, he never did ask me again if the child was his, but knowing him as I did, I suspected he had taken my tears as a scent. 08. The moment we returned to the manor, an imperial edict arrived. It praised my husband for his virtue and talent, and me for my gentle and modest conduct. He was granted 100 taels of gold and assigned to inspect the salt administration in Jiangzhou, to depart in half a month. Furthermore, I was conferred the title of second-class noble lady. Salt inspection was an extremely lucrative post. In peacetime, it was a position even high ministers and nobles vied for, and it had just fallen into my husband's lap. The eunuch who delivered the edict was overly polite, revealing nothing. My husband puzzled over it for half the night, finally concluding it was due to the emperor's lingering affection for his lost wife. Seeing someone who looked like her, me, had moved him. Coincidentally, the emperor's hometown was also in Jiangzhou. My husband decided to search there for traces of the emperor's wife. I bowed my head and said nothing. It was all for the better. In any case, my mother-in-law had been ill for years, bedridden, but hearing of the manor's great fortune, her health improved dramatically. Within days, she could even walk on her own. The once quiet Marquis manor suddenly became the center of attention. My cousin, who had rejected my husband so coldly before, now began visiting the manor several days in a row. Now that he was rising in favor, she claimed to be calling on me, but I knew she only used me as an excuse to see my husband. Unfortunately for her, my husband had long lost his feelings for her and avoided her at every turn. This only stoked her competitive spirit. She was determined to win him back. I pretended not to notice a thing, focusing only on my pregnancy. Let her play with men, if that was what she wanted. 09. On the day my husband left the capital, he held my hand with teary eyes. Wanwan, stay here safely and rest with the child. I will do everything I can to return before you give birth. I put on a moved expression and watched him ride away, seemingly longing for his return. The moment he was out of sight, my gentle expression faded. I had just sat down to tea when a servant reported. Shortly after my husband's carriage left the capital, my cousin had also taken a carriage and followed him out. I raised an eyebrow, unsurprised. My husband would have his hands full on this trip. Good, he could busy himself with his affairs, and I with mine. As expected, that very night, someone climbed into my chamber. Don't scream. The emperor covered my mouth. It's me, Wanwan. Once I recognized him, my eyes glistened, and tears began to fall. The emperor immediately panicked. Don't cry. He pulled me into his arms, his forehead pressed to mine. I took the chance and bit his shoulder. A low muffled sound came from above me, followed by a soft laugh. Feel better now? He asked. A flush rose to my cheeks. I pretended to be shy and bit his jaw. The candlelight in the room was hazy. His nose was tall and straight. His lips were thin, vivid, and red. I could not help but stare, captivated. He looked so much like him, just like my white moonlight. 10. The emperor's harem was empty. Court officials had been urging him to take consorts and secure the imperial line, yet he refused, citing his deep love for his first wife. The court buzzed with gossip, but the Empress Dowager calmed them all. She said the emperor was young and healthy, there was no rush for heirs. Rather than arguing over this, the ministers ought to help find the empress. The Empress Dowager is kind by nature, and does not crave power, the emperor murmured to me late at night. As we lay together, seeing that I handle state affairs well, she has begun to step back. He gently comforted me. Rest assured, Wanwan. I will marry you in full splendor as my empress. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his thunderous heartbeat. Beneath it, my own heartbeat was calm, steady, unhurried. I did not love my husband, but neither did I love the emperor. If I loved no one, then being empress would suit me well enough. If I truly became empress, I could do so many things I could not before. 11. My belly grew larger by the day, under the pretense that my husband was away from the capital. The emperor stationed imperial physicians in the manor permanently, supposedly to care for my mother-in-law and me. Once the physicians arrived, midwives, maids, and wet nurses were all arranged perfectly. Without me lifting a finger, my mother-in-law suspected nothing, only marveling at the emperor's great favor. But over these 2 months, rumors of my cousin and my husband had flooded back to the capital, stories of my cousin facing danger, and my husband heroically saving her. Tales of my husband meeting obstacles in the salt inspections, and my cousin offering clever advice. So many tales. I listened indifferently until a servant mentioned, "There is an illegal brothel in East Pinghu. The young lady rescued a girl who escaped." "Stop," I said, lifting my head. "What happened exactly?" "It's an unlicensed brothel, your ladyship. Most of the girls there are sold from good families, the oldest only 16 or so," the servant replied. "One girl couldn't take the abuse anymore and escaped. She was found by the young lady. They said when she was found, there wasn't a single unhurt spot on her body." My eyes darkened. "Watch her quietly, help her when the time is right," I said. "Yes, your ladyship." After the servant left, I was helped onto the couch by my maids. I stared blankly at the lush green trees outside the window. More than 10 years ago, the capital had also been full of such illegal brothels, but 10 years ago, one man had pushed through all opposition, advocating strict laws to shut them all down. Offenders were executed immediately. The victimized girls were properly resettled. After that, such places no longer existed in the capital. The man who had pushed for those laws was my white moonlight. 12. On the day I gave birth, my husband still had not returned. Naturally, the emperor could not appear in public. It was my first labor, and it was difficult. The imperial physician kept urging me to push. I trembled all over with pain, gritting my teeth to hold on. Even as my consciousness faded bit by bit, my mother-in-law paced anxiously outside the delivery room. In the end, she rushed in, her eyes red, and gripped my hand. "Wanna, don't be afraid, mother is here. Wake up, don't sleep." I had lost my own mother when I was little. Her words acted like a sharp stimulant to my mind. At last, with a loud cry, my child was born. "Congratulations, Marchioness, it's a little lady." "Good, good, good." My mother-in-law was too happy to speak. Holding my hand while ordering the servants to care for the baby, I drifted off into a drowsy sleep. Vaguely, I heard someone had come from the palace, bringing rich rewards of gold, silver, and jewels. My mother-in-law said I was unwell and thanked them on my behalf. 13. Under cover of night, the emperor climbed over the wall into my chamber again. I was asleep then, our baby lying in the cradle beside me. The emperor stared at the child, both joyful and clumsy, at a loss for what to do. When I woke up and saw him looking like a nervous first-time father, I almost laughed out loud. As soon as he saw I was awake, he hurried to my bedside. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, helping me sit up. "Rest assured, Your Majesty," I smiled, soothing him. "Since you're here, why not name the child before you leave? I've thought of many names already, but none feel right." He frowned. "There's no hurry. When you're stronger, we'll choose one together. Don't worry, I've already made plans. When the Marquis of Yongchang returns, I'll arrange for your divorce. Trust me, Wanwan, I will marry you in full splendor as my empress." The emperor intended to confront my husband directly. Later, he would have a trusted minister adopt me as his daughter. We would claim I had married him while recovering from illness in Jiangzhou, then become separated on the way back to the capital already with child. The only difficulty would be if my husband refused to divorce me willingly, but none of us expected that when my husband returned to the capital, he would be the one asking for a divorce. After returning to the manor, he first visited my mother-in-law, then came to see me. The moment he saw me, he asked for a divorce. That night, Yua and I got stranded in the wilderness. It started to rain, and we didn't mean to. A few days ago, the physician said Yua is 1 month pregnant. Yua says she will not be a concubine. You have my word, I will raise the child myself. You need not worry about wealth or possessions, take whatever you want, so long as I have it, agree to the divorce, and you can have anything you wish." I fell silent, looking at the man before me. I suddenly remembered the time before my marriage, when the Marquis Manor had suddenly sent matchmakers to propose for the heir. My birth mother had died young, my father remarried and soon had more children, he cared for me only in name, and my stepmother had always been cold to me. I never hoped they would arrange a good marriage for me. After weighing the pros and cons, I had agreed readily. Even back then, I had seen my husband clearly. He was soft-hearted, weak, and easily tempted. He also had a weak ear and clung to old feelings. One flicker of encouragement from my cousin, and he fawned over her like a puppy. Yet after staying by my side day and night, he would decide a virtuous wife was not so bad. Fortunately, he was born in the Marquis Manor, the eldest legitimate son. Even without great opportunities, he would live his life as an idle Marquis of Yongchang. I had chosen him precisely because he was soft-hearted, thinking this way. It was no surprise he had softened for my cousin. "Does mother know about this?" I asked. My husband shook his head, embarrassed. "You want me to tell her?" I asked again, under his anxious gaze. I sighed. "I agree to the divorce. I will even speak to mother for you," I said. "But I want to meet your cousin alone." 14. My cousin came to the manor. When she saw me, she seemed awkward. Regret and remorse filled her eyes. That was more like it. I felt relieved. My cousin had always been proud and competitive since childhood. All these years, she had refused all marriage proposals, yet kept many men in the capital wrapped around her finger. Some praised her beauty and talent, others whispered she was unvirtuous. But only I, her close cousin, understood. She only craved the thrill of being admired and conquering others, just like when she had told my husband to return to me. "Even if you have a harmonious marriage, what you have, I gave you." She reveled in that feeling. Besides, my cousin had always looked down on everyone. Once, she had set her sights on the two princes most likely to seize the throne, but when the new emperor ascended, those princes fell from grace. Meanwhile, my husband was suddenly favored by the emperor and poised to become a rising power in court. Only then did my cousin remember him. Even so, she would never have willingly submitted to him, not unless things had gone wrong. "Don't be afraid. I've already agreed to the divorce," I said. "I invited you here only to ask one thing. That illegal brothel in East Pinghu, how far have you gotten with it?" My cousin froze. "The illegal brothel in East Pinghu," she exclaimed. "You called me here just to ask about that, not your husband. A man is just a man." I said indifferently, "If you want him, you can have him. What about the brothel? How far have you gone? What about the girls?" My cousin stared at me for a long time. Then slowly lowered her eyes. "I couldn't get them out. The brothel is backed by powerful local families in Jiangxia. Many high ministers are involved. I tried everything I could. I could only bring Schwanger back to the capital first and plan my next move." She told me everything she had seen and learned in Pinghu, who was behind the brothel, which forces were tangled up in it. Though she was but a single person against a giant tree, she had done all she could. "I understand," I said, memorizing the names carefully. "You've done well, I'll handle the rest. You can rest easy. I will divorce him." My cousin stared at me, dumbfounded. You don't blame me?" she asked, disbelieving. After a long while, I smiled. "I don't blame you. Once, someone told me, women already have it hard enough in this world. We shouldn't make things harder for each other. If a man loved a married woman and waited for her to divorce before marrying her, the world would praise him for his devotion. Why should a woman be cursed for the same? If I am to blame you, I will wait until men are equally condemned and then we may curse together. Compared to that, I would only blame you if you surrendered to power and abandoned those girls." 15. I went to speak with my mother-in-law about the divorce. She flew into a panic the moment she heard, struggled out of bed despite her illness, and used family law to beat my husband until he howled. He was beaten unconscious. My mother-in-law gasped for breath, clutching her chest. "Wanwan, don't you worry. As long as I live, no one will drive you out. That Yua wants to marry into this manor. Fine, I'll go tell her right now. She can marry in, but only as a concubine. Let's see if her family can bear the shame." "Mother," I tugged at her sleeve. I've already spoken with your son. I've agreed. Agreed or not? My mother-in-law suddenly stopped short, her voice dying. You agreed? She asked, stunned. I nodded. She stared at me for a long while, then suddenly dismissed the servants and pulled me down to sit. No one else is here now. You don't have to be afraid. Tell me everything. I will stand up for you. I could not help but laugh, and had to reassure her again and again that I was doing this willingly. Even if I refused the divorce and let Liu Rua be a concubine, what then? I said, am I to spend my whole life fighting her in this big mansion? You fought a lifetime against Lord Father's concubines. You should know how painful that is. My mother-in-law fell silent, her grip on my hand softening. In his youth, Lord Father had been unfaithful, filling the manor with concubines and illegitimate children. She had worried and schemed every single day. Only in old age, when he had settled down, had she finally lived in peace, and her whole life had passed by then. Has His Majesty promised you a proper title? She asked suddenly. This time, it was my turn to be shocked. How did you know? She patted my hand. I've run this household for many years. The Emperor climbing over the wall every night, how could I not know? I could hardly believe it. Aren't you angry that I've disgraced the Marquis manor? My mother-in-law sighed. I know full well what Honga has been like these years. Believe me, I don't blame you at all. Between husband and wife, the husband must first show kindness before the wife shows loyalty. I'm certain if Honga had been dependable, you would have guarded this manor loyally all your life. After all, he's my only son. I spoiled him too much, and he turned out this way. Besides, all these years you've cared for me. I've long thought of you as my own daughter. Has His Majesty made arrangements for you and the child? She asked worriedly. At last, I smiled, then gently held her hand in return. Don't worry, everything is arranged. 16. After the Marquis of Yongchang divorced his wife, he quickly married the famous talent of the capital, Liu Rua. As for the former Marchioness, it was said she had grown tired of mortal affairs and retreated into Buddhism. Her birth mother had died young. Her father and stepmother tried to persuade her. But once they saw her mind was made up, they let her be. This was just a small incident. Within days, far grander news came from the palace. The Empress had returned to the capital. It was said that Her Majesty was the youngest legitimate daughter of Grand Secretary Shu, raised in his hometown. She had fallen in love at first sight with the current emperor and married him. After their wedding, Miss Shu accompanied him to the capital for the imperial exams and to meet his parents. But they were separated unexpectedly on the road. After the separation, Miss Shu discovered she was pregnant and had to stay in a nearby village. Only after giving birth to the eldest princess did she return to the capital. At the enthronement ceremony, the emperor took my hand and walked up the towering steps with me. Looking at the dark sea of people below, I felt a faint daze. Once, the lifelong wish of my white moonlight had been to stand right here, to ease the sufferings of the people and bring them blessings. Now I stood here. There was only one difference. I was the Empress, Shu Wanwan, 17. On my second day in the palace, I went to greet the Empress Dowager. She had been the late Emperor's queen. She once had a daughter, who had died in an accident 10 years earlier. After the Emperor ascended the throne, she ruled behind the curtain. Once everything was stable, she gradually gave up power and withdrew from state affairs. Though not his birth mother, the Emperor respected her sincerely. When she saw my face clearly, she froze slightly. Why do I feel I have seen you somewhere before? Perhaps Your Majesty saw me when I was young and entered the palace. I quickly deflected. The Empress Dowager took my hand, studied me closely, and then suddenly smiled. Sit, she said. I have had little luck with children. In my old age, I have no one to hold close. The late emperor had only His Majesty as his heir, so I have always regarded him as my own son. Seeing you today reminds me of my daughter, who died young. Do you know of Princess Jowie? Princess Jowie. The 4 words exploded like fireworks in my mind. 10 years. No one in the capital had spoken this name again. Once so brilliant, yet after death, silent and forgotten. I quickly lowered my head, holding back tears. How could this concubine not know of someone like Princess Jowie? The Empress Dowager looked deep into me, then spoke on her own. When Jowie was alive, she started a girls' school in the capital. inviting all girls of age to study. Some old-fashioned families said a woman's virtue was ignorance and refused to send their daughters. Jowie went door to door to persuade them, saying all books and paper would be free, they only needed to send the girls. When a princess persuades, who dares refuse? In the end, over 1,000 girls filled that school. Listening to her words, the tears in my eyes spilled over, dripping onto my empress's robes. My stepmother had not wanted me to study too much. She only planned to marry me off to some distant official's family when I came of age, so when she heard about the girls' school, she had refused to let me go. But no one expected Princess Jowie to come to our door in person. Reasoning with her gently but firmly, my stepmother had no choice but to agree, and so, at 6 years old, I finally had the chance to read and write. Although the court talked endlessly, the late emperor had only her as his child, so he let her do as she pleased. I remember after the school had been open a few years, Jowie told me happily that there was a little girl from the Liu family, young, but extremely talented. Her essays impressed even the great scholars. Jowie also said that if there were an imperial examination for women, she would surely place high. At this, I could bear it no longer. I raised my hands to cover my face, letting my tears soak the handkerchief silently. But no matter how hard I held back, a few soft sobs escaped. 10 years. Princess Jowie had been dead for 10 years. 10 years ago, she had asked the late emperor to hold an imperial examination for women, so that talented females could serve the court. But before the emperor could approve, she was killed. Princess Jowie loved riding horses, but that day, her body was found discarded outside the city. The officials investigated, yet only found a few bandits. The bandits claimed they had only wanted to rob her, they did not know who she was. The late emperor lost his beloved daughter. In his rage, he ordered a deeper investigation, but the bandits committed suicide in prison, and so the case was closed. In the 10 years since, no one had spoken her name. The Empress Dowager dismissed the attendants, drew me into her arms, and gently stroked my hair. "My child, don't cry, it's all over now." When I finally stopped crying, she comforted me softly. "It's not over," I mumbled into her chest. "We still have far to go." 18. The illegal brothel in East Pinghu was completely wiped out. The investigation dragged in a mess of corrupt people, all of whom received severe punishment. The brothel had existed to serve local officials and nobles who preyed on young girls. These men had acted arrogantly and cruelly, killing countless lives. Locals had reported them to the authorities, but those in power either stood aside or joined in. For years, no one dared speak of it. Over time, people grew used to it, but this time was different. A girl named Schwanger escaped and happened to meet the current Marchioness of Yongchang. The kind Marchioness took her in as a maid, hid her from the brothel's men, and brought her back to the capital. Once in the capital, Schwanger beat the imperial appeal drum to cry out her injustice. When the current empress heard, she flew into a rage and ordered a thorough investigation. The local nobles did not take it seriously. The emperor had just ascended, and the empress's father, Grand Secretary Shu, was already retired. How much trouble could she cause? Only when they were dragged to the execution ground did they realize their mistake. Inside the palace, while I was holding and playing with the princess, Madame Liu from Censor Li's family came to visit. Madame Liu had been close to me since childhood. I could not hide my true identity from her. After 3 cups of tea, she quietly reported the outcome of the brothel case. Those involved were either beheaded or exiled. The rescued girls, those who had been kidnapped, were given money and sent home. Those with nowhere to go were placed in a new girls' school, where they were taught to read and sew, supported until they were adopted or married. Most of the money came from the wives of court officials, Madame Liu of Censor Li, Madame Xie of Vice Minister Wang, Madame Qian of Prefect Zhu, and many more. Time seemed to fold back over itself. More than 10 years ago, back then, Princess Jowie had discovered the illegal brothels in the capital. Filled with anger and grief, she had planned to expose the whole scandal, but people had advised her, the waters were too deep, let it go. Princess Jowie had refused. "If I don't speak, if you don't act, who will? Who will? Should we let the little girls sold by their own families into brothels, diseased and left to die on the streets speak? Should we let women divorced for being infertile, sold when their husbands gambled away their money, forced their whole lives to accept their fate speak? Or women violated and disgraced, then blamed as adulteresses, paraded through streets and drowned in pig cages? We have studied, we have letters, we have power and money. If we don't speak, who will? Are we to numb ourselves and accept this? Generation after generation, when she spoke those words, she was like the sun, burning straight into our minds. We once saw light, though the sun has now set, candles still burn in our hearts. Those faint glimmers are like drops of water, merging into an ocean flowing toward the future, just as Princess Jowie once described to us. In a future far beyond our reach, women would also attend schools, take imperial exams, and stand tall between heaven and earth, just like men. The princess babbled in my arms, waving her little hands to grab the cloth tiger in my grasp. Madame Liu watched fondly, smiling widely. "Has your majesty named the princess yet?" she asked. "I have," I smiled and nodded. "Her name is Chaoyang, morning sun. Shining bright like the sunrise of tomorrow, like our hope."